Ladies and gentlemen, when you hear the words fire at a nuclear power plant, that tends to get your attention faster than a gas station sign flipping to $9 a gallon, doesn't it? This is exactly what just happened in the United Arab Emirates after a suspected Iranian drone struck a generator at a nuclear facility, sending smoke all up in the sky and sending the entire Middle East into full-blown panic mode. But here's a twist. While the regime in Iran was apparently multitasking between diplomacy and drone deliveries, President Donald Trump looked at Tehran's latest proposal and basically said, if I don't like the first sentence, straight to the shredder. Translation, no nuclear weapons, not for 20 years, not for 20 minutes, not ever. Meanwhile, Karg Island, the regime's economic ATM, is sitting there like a giant break glass in case of emergency button. So the question is simple. Was this a warning shot, or was it the moment that the whole narrative just went up in smoke? Well, I'm going to go ahead and break it all down for us. And of course, if you're new here, subscribe today. This is the one enrichment program guaranteed not to involve uranium. And of course, if you need free Medicare help, I've partnered with Chapter. Those guys are absolutely amazing. Click the link in the description down below this video or dial the phone number at the bottom of your screen here, 909-563-8279. And if you enjoy the video, leave me a like on the way out. It tells YouTube that this breakdown was more explosive than the headlines. All right, so there are certain phrases that instantly make your stomach drop. Fire in the kitchen, your flight has been delayed, perhaps the worst of all, fire at a nuclear power plant. That kind of usually does it for me. This is exactly what happened in the United Arab Emirates. Now, according to the intel, a suspected Iranian drone struck a generator at a nuclear facility on the outskirts of the plant, sparking this massive fire and sending a very clear message to the world. This conflict is not cooling down. It's actually heating up. So when the words nuclear plant and fire appear in the same sentence, people understandably stop scrolling. I mean, even if the fire was confined to a generator and not the reactor itself, this distinction tends to get lost when everybody's imagining like big old mushroom clouds and checking gas prices at the same time. This is why the story exploded. One drone, one fire, and suddenly the whole entire Middle East looks like a giant powder keg sitting next to a lit match. So now I want to talk about the timing, guys. This attack didn't happen in a vacuum. It actually came right as negotiations between Iran and the United States were stalling. So President Donald Trump, he had just made it crystal clear that he would not accept any agreement that leaves Iran with even a remote path to nuclear weapons. Then, almost on cue, a drone hits a nuclear facility in the UAE. Coincidence? Maybe, but in politics, coincidence is often just another word for message received. And the audience noticed this immediately, right? One of the most interesting comments I saw was, this is one hell of a ceasefire. Exactly, guys. Apparently, in some diplomatic circles, a ceasefire means everybody keeps firing while the press releases insist things are productive. In other words, Iran may have just tested Trump. And Trump's not exactly known for responding with a strongly worded letter in a fruit basket. So President Donald Trump was asked about Iran's response to the latest U.S. proposal. His answer was classic Trump. He said, if I don't like the first sentence, I just go ahead and throw it away. That's it. No 27 committees, no blue ribbon panel, no 400-page report with the words framework for future dialogue, none of that. He reads the first sentence, and if it smells like stalling or spin or BS or diplomatic versions of trust us, bro, it goes straight in the trash can.
I looked at it, and if I don't like the first sentence, I just throw it away. What was the first sentence? An unacceptable sentence. is they're fully agreed, no nuclear, and if they have any nuclear of any form, I don't read the rest of it.
So 20 years is not enough for you. It's got to be a permanent.
No, 20 years is enough, but the level of guarantee from them is not enough. In other words, it's got to be a real 20 years.
And what was Trump's red line? No nuclear weapons. Not no nuclear weapons for a little while. Not no nuclear weapons until everybody forgets. Just no nuclear weapons, period. Guys, 20 years is not even enough. Try never. And this is the mood of the country. Many Americans believe that giving Iran a 20-year timeout is kind of like telling a teenager, you're grounded until dinner. The problem doesn't disappear, it just waits. Oh, and by the way, if you know somebody who still thinks that this is just another routine headline, send them this video. One drone, one fire, and suddenly the whole world is paying attention, right? So this is where the debate gets very real. Trump said 20 years might sound fine on paper, but only if the guarantee is real. Now that word matters, real, because 20 years sounds like a long time until you realize that in geopolitics, it passes in the blink of an eye. But think about it. 25 years, 25 years, I mean, that can go by in a blink of an eye. YouTube didn't exist 20 years ago, right? The iPhone didn't exist 20 years ago. Many people still had flip phones that looked like they belong in a spy movie 20 years ago. So now we're supposed to believe that the regime in Tehran will just simply become trustworthy because we set a timer. This is why so many viewers are saying the only acceptable number is zero. Zero centrifuges, zero loopholes, zero chance of a nuclear weapon. Because when the stakes are this high, we'll deal with it in 20 years sounds a lot less like strategy and a whole lot more like kicking the can down a radioactive road. So at the heart of the whole story is one very uncomfortable reality. A huge number of Americans simply do not trust the regime in Tehran. And frankly, it's not hard to understand why. For years, Iranian officials insisted that they had no nuclear ambitions. They lied. Then inspectors found enrichment activity. Then the explanations changed. Then the deadlines moved. Then, just when the negotiations were supposedly underway, a suspected drone strike hit a nuclear facility in the United Arab Emirates. I mean, you just can't make a deal with the devil, can you? There's no negotiating with terrorists. This blunt language reflects a broader sentiment. Many people believe that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is driven more by ideology than by self-preservation. In other words, while most governments worry about inflation and elections and whether voters are upset about grocery prices, the IRGC often appears willing to absorb enormous pain in pursuit of its goals. This makes diplomacy incredibly difficult because if one side treats negotiations like a path to peace, but the other side treats them like a path or a way to buy time, you don't have a deal, you have a delay.
And we're not flying anymore with 18-hour flights every time we want to see a piece of paper. We're doing it telephonically, and it's very nice. I make a call, or I have my people make a call, and you know the answer. I always like face-to-face. I consider it better. But when you have to fly 18 hours every time you want to have a meeting, and you know what the meeting's all about, and you know they're going to give you a piece of paper that you don't like before you even leave. It's ridiculous. They've come a long way. The question is whether or not they're going to go far enough. So at this moment, there will never be a deal unless they agree that there will be no nuclear weapons.
A few moments ago, he says, I've just read the response from Iran's so-called representatives. I don't like it. Totally unacceptable, is what he said. Iran's news agency had claimed that Tehran's response focused on ending hostilities and maritime security in the Strait of Hormuz. Acting as a mediator, Pakistan's Prime Minister confirmed he had received a reply to the 14.1-page US memo, which included provisions such as the suspension of Iran's nuclear enrichment, the lifting of sanctions and restoring free transit through the Strait. But for whatever reason, and we're still awaiting the specific details of both sets of proposals, but what we do know now is that the US doesn't like it, so it's not going anywhere. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says despite peace talks, the war is not over.
I think it accomplished a great deal, but it's not over because there's still nuclear material, enriched uranium that has to be taken out of Iran. There's still enrichment sites that have to be dismantled. There are still proxies that Iran supports. There are ballistic missiles that they still want to produce.
This is one of the most common questions I get. If Iran gets obliterated, then how are they still launching attacks, right? Well, it's a fair question. And the answer is that military conflicts are rarely as clean and final as the headline suggests. Since the last time we talked about Enhanced Games Incorporated, this company has been moving at what can only be described as Trump speed. And if you followed President Donald J. Trump long enough, you know exactly what that means. So while the mainstream media was still arguing over yesterday's headlines, some companies are quietly putting together deals, partnerships, and growth strategies that could fundamentally change their trajectory. Now, today's video is sponsored by Outside the Box Capital Incorporated on behalf of Enhanced Group Incorporated, currently trading on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol ENHA. Now, what exactly is Enhanced? Well, at first glance, you might think that it's just another sports company, but that would be like looking at Trump Tower and saying, nice building. You're missing the entire empire behind it. Enhanced is building a three-part business model. So first, there's the Enhanced Games, a new elite sport competition where athletes compete under medical supervision with a focus on maximizing human performance. Second, there's Live Enhanced, the company's direct-to-consumer telehealth platform that offers supplements, peptides, prescription protocol, and personalized performance solutions. And third, there's the media and sponsorship ecosystem, which essentially turns the attention generated by the games into advertising revenue, strategic partnerships, and long-term customer acquisition. In other words, the games attract the audience discovers Live Enhanced, and Live Enhanced generates recurring revenue. That's the flywheel. Now, just in the last few days, Enhanced has announced a series of major partnerships. Roku Incorporated, now the North American streaming home of the inaugural Enhanced Games, giving the event access to roughly 100 million households. So Rumble Incorporated has become an official distribution partner and will help market Live Enhanced to its more than 50 million users. Now, given Rumble's audience overlap with many supporters of President Trump, that partnership could prove especially strategic. Resolve AI Limited is building AI-powered medical concierge technology and personalization tools for the Live Enhanced platform. Zoop signed a reported $10 million founding partnership deal, and Public Holdings Incorporated is helping introduce Enhanced to its retail investing community. Now, think about what this means. Enhanced is not simply launching a sporting event. It is building a company at the intersection of sports, telehealth, artificial intelligence, AI, and of course, the consumer products that it has. Now, just imagine if Red Bull, Hims and Hers, and a cutting-edge AI platform had a child and then gave it the kind of media attention that tends to follow President Trump wherever he goes. That appears to be what management is attempting to build here. The May 24th inaugural Enhanced Games in Las Vegas could be a pivotal catalyst. If viewership is strong and consumer interest follows, the company may demonstrate that the real opportunity lies in recurring subscription revenue through Live Enhanced. Now, of course, there are risks. This is an early stage company operating in a controversial space, and execution will matter enormously. But of course, the pace of partnership announcements suggests that management is moving quickly to build credibility, distribution, and monetization channels. As President Donald Trump has often shown, bold ideas tend to attract both intense criticism and significant attention. In business, that attention can become a very powerful asset. Enhanced Group Incorporated, trading under ticker symbol ENHA on the NYSE, is certainly a company that some investors are watching closely. Now, I'm not an investment advisor, and this is not investment advice. Always conduct your own due diligence and consult with a qualified financial professional before making any investment decisions. So a country can suffer major losses and still retain their drones and missiles and command structures and regional proxies. Now, think of it kind of like a football team losing its star quarterback. The offense might be weaker, but the game's not over. Now, this appears to be the case with Iran. The regime may be under pressure, the economy may be struggling, its leadership may be more isolated, but isolated doesn't mean harmless, and weakened doesn't mean incapable. This is why this latest strike matters. It reminds everybody that even a battered regime can still inflict damage, which is exactly why so many viewers are saying that the current approach cannot stop halfway. We gotta finish the job, because in their eyes, if Iran can still launch drones, then the problem is not yet solved. So just when the tensions were sky high, President Donald J. Trump, he jumped on the Truth Social and he posted one of those messages that really makes the entire internet sit up straight. The image showed Trump standing in a futuristic command center. Giant screens are glowing, missiles streaking across the sky, and the logo for the United States Space Force in the background. And the caption? It was the calm before the storm. Now, this is not exactly the kind of post that you make when you're planning a quiet weekend, but this is classic Trump, guys. Part signal, part suspense, and part movie trailer, right? So all of it was designed to send one message to Tehran: don't mistake patience for weakness. Now, Trump didn't say what he would do next. He didn't have to. Sometimes the most powerful statement is just kind of letting the other side just imagine every possible scenario. And judging by the reaction, that post did exactly what it was intended to do. It turned anxiety into anticipation. And it reminded the world that President Trump likes to keep everybody guessing right up until the moment that he moves. So at the same time, the USS General R. Ford returned home after the longest deployment for a U.S. carrier strike group since the Vietnam War.
The USS Gerald R. Ford returned home to Norfolk, Virginia Saturday, ending a 326-day deployment, the longest for an aircraft carrier since the Vietnam War. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth greeted the sailors, some of them meeting their children for the first time.
What the Ford Carrier Strike Group did and these destroyers did is exceptional, phenomenal.
The ship wrapped up its deployments in the Middle East.
To be a part of ensuring that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. A historic mission that we will finish.
When that mission will finish remains unclear. President Trump said Friday on his way back from China, much has been accomplished.
We've wiped out their armed forces, essentially. We may have to do a little cleanup work because we had a little month-long ceasefire, I guess you'd call it, but we have a blockade that's so effective. That's why we did the ceasefire.
Pakistan continues to mediate a permanent ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran as the conflict enters its 12th week.
Absolute resolve, epic fury. It's an incredible story, and the only story that should be told today is of the heroism and the skill and the professionalism of these sailors who went 3 times around the globe to defend that flag right there, which can only do what this strike group does.
This is not a small detail. The ship is essentially a floating city packed with fighter jets, radar systems, enough firepower to make even the most confident regime in the world suddenly become a very interested person in diplomacy. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, he praised the sailors for what he called absolute resolve and epic fury. And yes, Operation Epic Fury sounds like either a military campaign or maybe the greatest action movie ever made, but the symbolism matters, guys. The message is simple. The United States has the capability, it has the reach, and the readiness to respond if necessary. So while the carrier may be back in port, America's military posture remains unmistakable. The world is being reminded that behind every diplomatic proposal is a very large stick. And everybody knows President Trump is not afraid to use it. Now, if you want to understand where the real pressure point is, look no further than Karg Island. Now, most Americans have never even heard of it, but the folks in Tehran think about it every single day. Why? Because Karg Island handles roughly 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. In other words, it is the regime's economic ATM. It's like a giant piggy bank for them. It's like, please keep funding the government button. If the island were ever disrupted, the financial pain would be immediate and severe. This is why intel reports suggesting President Trump could target Karg Island sent shockwaves through the region. You don't need to invade a country to put enormous pressure on it. Sometimes all you need to do is kind of squeeze the place where the money comes from. Now, for Iran, that place is Karg Island. No oil revenue means fewer resources. Fewer resources mean less room for maneuver. And suddenly the regime discovers that ideology is much easier to maintain when the checks keep clearing.
Military experts have told CBS News one of the places troops could be sent is Karg Island, about 15 miles off the Iranian coast. The heavily fortified island is Iran's main hub for oil exports and one of the country's most important revenue sources.
It's up here in this sort of western reaches of the Persian Gulf, just a few miles off the coast of Iran. The purpose would be, right now, the reason why prices are so high at the pump, as you were just talking about in the last segment, is because energy traffic out of the Strait of Hormuz is restricted. But an irony.
So this is where the story gets even more interesting. The real threat for the Iranian regime may not be coming from outside the country. it may be coming from inside. So as sanctions bite and uncertainty grows, everyday Iranians are feeling the pain. Prices rise, jobs disappear, savings shrink, and patience wears thin. Israeli officials have described the current situation as an existential threat to the regime, not necessarily because of bombs, but because of internal pressure. Now that pressure matters. History shows that governments can survive external enemies for years. What they often struggle to survive is their own population asking, why are we doing this? Now, one commentator summed it up with a pretty clever comment, said, make Persia great again. Behind the humor is a very serious point. Many ordinary Iranians, they just want stability and prosperity and a normal life. The more the economy weakens, the harder it becomes for the leadership in Tehran to maintain support. And that may be the leverage that President Trump's administration is counting on. Now, I want to talk about the one thing that gets everybody's attention even faster than geopolitics, their wallet. The moment the news broke that a suspected Iranian drone had struck a nuclear facility in the United Arab Emirates, traders around the world started doing what traders do best, panicking professionally. Because whenever the words Iran, Persian Gulf, and nuclear plant appear in the same headline, markets immediately begin pricing in risk, higher oil prices, higher gasoline costs, higher shipping expenses, and yes, potentially higher prices for the stuff you buy every single week. So the market absolutely hates uncertainty. It hates surprises. It especially hates surprise involving drones, oil tankers, and a region that supplies a huge share of the world's energy. So while politicians debate strategy, investors are watching the same question everybody else is asking. Is this a one-off incident, or is this the beginning of something much bigger? Because if the answer is something much bigger, your next trip to the gas station may feel like a charitable donation. And that kind of brings us to the central issue. Everything in this story, the drone strike, the stalled negotiations, the military buildup, the economic pressure, it all comes down to one question. Should Iran ever be allowed to possess a nuclear weapon? President Trump has made his answer unmistakably clear. No. Not for 20 years, not for 20 months, not for 20 minutes. Just no. This is why his response resonated so strongly. And it's also why one of the most liked comments that I've gotten in a long time, 20 years is not enough. Try never. Now, for millions of Americans, this is the only answer that makes sense. So now the world waits to see what happens next. Does Tehran back down? Does diplomacy prevail? Or does this crisis elevate and escalate even further? Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. Should Iran ever be allowed to enrich uranium again? Now, if you found this breakdown helpful, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who wants the facts without the fog machine. As always, guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.